Hello and welcome to Calls. This is the May 21st MLB DraftKings lineup card. Only 6 games on the nightly slate this evening, so we have the opportunity to really dig in, figure out some of the optimal players that we want to use. I have a couple of positions that I think provide some intrigue today, and with only 12 starting pitchers, we can scrutinize them very heavily. But I want to hear about your day yesterday. Hopefully you joined in my success. It was quite a fun evening for me. A lot of the recommendations that I made, I ended up using in my lineups. I mentioned my lock of the evening was Trevor Story, and one grand slam later, it was a good evening. And then again, I had some pretty rough and awful recommendations as well. So it was an interesting inning. Sure, I mean that works too. It was an interesting evening, but overall it was a good one. So let's get right into it. All statistics provided today and every day are from BaseballReference.com. It is simply the best tool out there for anything you want to look at statistics-wise for baseball, whether it's home road splits, batter versus pitcher, historical seasons, even player comparisons. I discover something new every day. It is simply amazing. Go check them out. It is well worth the investment. In the descriptions to all 3 video or streaming services, there are links to my social media. This is where I post my betting cards for golf content that I make, and any research that I find interesting, I usually post to social media as well. So if you want to see some of that research that I do, make sure to give me a follow at the links in the descriptions. And then finally, we are live. Chat's open. I want to hear from you all. Like I mentioned, how was your evening? Did you end up using Trevor Story? Did you end up using Cole Calhoun that hit a homer? Did you end up using a lot of these players that I recommended that didn't do well? I was really high on Daniel Lynch yesterday in the Minnesota-Kansas City game. That turned out awful if you use Daniel Lynch. I just want to hear all about it. So jump in chat, join me. We'll have some banter about some favorite teams and favorite players and such. So let's get right into the May 21st MLB DraftKings slate. And we start with the first game on the slate is the same one as last evening's. It is Tampa Bay at Baltimore. So we go to Camden Yards, and the wind is the same today, blowing out to left. And there were quite a few players that I was really high on Baltimore yesterday, and it worked out okay. Santander, Mancini, even Austin Hayes had a decent. I don't think Austin Hayes had a good game, but Santander and Mancini had pretty good games. But the one thing I do remember from this game is that I did not like Mike Zunino at his price, and he had a 3-run homer. So, good and bad. But today you have Jeffrey Springs pitching for Tampa Bay. He is generally a reliever, but he is 1-1 this year, has pitched very, very well. He just hasn't thrown many innings. He has thrown 21 2/3 innings, so not a lot of experience here, or at least usage this season. But he is getting the start, and DraftKings is not listing an opener. So I'm not sure if the strategy is to try to lengthen Springs out, but you see he is at 4,000. So whether that is as an opener or whatnot, I'm going to actually refresh DraftKings over here. And again, I don't see the opener tag. So maybe they're trying to stretch him out. Either way, he has pitched very, very effectively. You see there, 1.66 ERA. He has 20 strikeouts and 21 2/3 innings. Left-handed pitcher, so a lot of intrigue there against this Baltimore lineup. But let's first cover Tampa Bay's lineup against Kyle Bradish, or Bradish. I'm going to say Bradish. His rookie season, he is 1-2 with a 5.06 ERA, right-handed throwing pitcher. But when I look and dug into the stats, he's actually got some reverse splits going on. Let me make sure I have my notes over here. He is 0-2 at home with a 6.28 ERA. Not good. And right-handed hitters are hitting 378 off him, even though he is a right-handed pitcher. Lefties only hitting 200. So because of that, and Tampa Bay has never faced him. None of the hitters have pitched against Bradish since this is his rookie season. I put in quite a few right-handed hitters for Tampa Bay. So I've highlighted Mike Zunino for obvious reasons. It's the power output that you're looking for. Again, very hefty in price at $4,500. But if he is anywhere other than maybe 8th or 9th, I would be interested. It was mainly the 4,400 and him batting 8th that really drew me away from Zunino last night and came back to bite me. But highlighting Zunino, I'm also going to highlight the other catcher, depending on who starts this game for Tampa Bay. Francisco Mejia, switch hitting catcher. He generally hits better. He has a better batting average, if I could talk, hitting left-handed. Hitting right-handed, but he has more power hitting left-handed, which he would be doing against Bradish today. So interesting there, especially with the wind blowing out to left center. Could be the potential for a couple of extra base hits or whatnot. And then the last player I want to highlight for you all on Tampa Bay is Yandy Diaz, leadoff hitter for Tampa Bay. Very, very patient hitter and very good season so far, hitting .281. On base 40% of the time. He's got more walks than strikeouts by a good margin. Now, you don't get a lot of extra base hits, so you're banking on him, drawing a walk, maybe getting a single, not a lot of points there, but then getting driven in by the middle of the order for Tampa Bay. But again, hitting .281. He's averaging 1.6 points per plate appearance, so it's not the highest. A lot of that due to the lack of extra base power. But I did not highlight Wander Franco. I went and dug into his splits, and he is a much better hitter right-handed than he is left-handed, at least early on in his career. So I did not list Wander Franco. I also did not list Randy Arozarena. He had a big night last night, went 4 for 5, but on the season he's still only hitting .245, less than on base less than 30% of the time. I'm just down on Arozarena until he hits one of those hot streaks and starts performing. Maybe last night is the start of that, but I'm going to have to see it over a prolonged period, not just one night. So I'm highlighting Yandy Diaz for another fact that there's not a lot at third base today. Again, with only 6 games, 12 third basemen, there's not a lot here. One position in particular has a ton, but not a lot at third. And then the catcher is always pretty sparse in offensive production. So I like the potential for both of Tampa's catchers. Hopefully Mike Zunino is hitting higher in the lineup. That would easily or make me feel more easy about justifying his $4,500 price. But Mejia at $3,700 at least presents some intrigue. And then for Baltimore's lineup against Jeffrey Springs, Springs being a left-handed pitcher, I've only highlighted Anthony Santander. Again, still pretty hot this week. His career numbers against Springs, not the best, but it's about the only one who's had success against Springs in this Baltimore lineup. He is 1 for 3 with a double. He is one of 3 players with a hit off of Springs in their career. Now, Springs hasn't had a lot of plate appearances against, or the Baltimore hitters haven't had a lot of plate appearances against Springs, I should say. But Cedric Mullins, 0 for 4. Mancini, 0 for 3. Austin Hayes, 0 for 3, 3 strikeouts. Ronette Odor is one hitter, another hitter that has one hit. He's 1 for 3. The other 2 plate appearances are strikeouts. So Springs is interesting if you think he's going to get a fair share of innings. If you think he'll get 5 innings, then he presents a lot of potential value at $4,000. him being a strikeout pitcher and the success that he's had against these Baltimore hitters, striking them out 8 times in his very limited work against them, presents a lot of intrigue. It is a very, very risky option today, but one that you can take if you are trying to attack this Baltimore lineup, especially since the main portion of the Baltimore lineup has not had a lot of success against Springs. So there is a look at Tampa Bay and Baltimore. So we move to the second game on the slate tonight, and that is in Houston for the interdivisional matchup between Texas and Houston. This is one game I got incredibly wrong last night, except for Cole Calhoun. I was very high on him. His numbers against Christian Javier were very good, but I saw this as an offensive star slugging game. Ended up being 3-0. Martin Perez pitched a complete game shutout. I thought Houston matched up really well against Martin Perez, and turns out it just wasn't meant to be. And that's the beauty of baseball. Martin Perez shut them down. Any lineups that I stacked or mini stacked Astros went completely into the dumpster with this game, as I had no Martin Perez. But coming to today's game, a seemingly one-sided pitching matchup. John Gray going for the Rangers, 1-1, very high ERA. He has struggled this year, but he does have 23 strikeouts in 22 innings. But that 22 innings is in 5 starts, so he's averaging less than 5 innings a start. His whip is pretty darn high at 1.36, giving up a lot of hits. Generally pretty controlled, but getting hit around a lot. And then on the other side, what's there to say? It's Justin Verlander. You are going to pay the price for him. It is a good matchup. I imagine Verlander is going to be close to 60 to 70% owned, and I can't argue against it. It seems like a pretty good matchup for him. The Texas hitters have struggled against him. So let's talk about that lineup. I've highlighted 2 players here. Marcus Semien, although he is off to atrocious, an absolute terrible start to his season, hitting 177, no homers yet for Marcus Semien, really, really struggling. His numbers against Justin Verlander aren't too bad. He, in his career, is a .294 hitter with 1 double, 1 triple, and 1 homer. So some pretty good success there, but he's also struck out 9 times against Verlander. So if you want to believe in the, or if you want to try and fade Justin Verlander, not use him, one option could be Marcus Semien. I don't recommend it, especially at the price of $4,100. That's awful lot to spend on a guy who is hitting sub 200 so far, first month and a half of the season. And it would be different if the rest of the lineup were producing, but the rest of the Texas lineup really isn't producing either. Corey Seager has struggled. He's hitting 250, 8 homers, but he only gets on base 32% of the time. Adolis Garcia only hitting 203. The power output's there, but his numbers against Verlander are awful. Brad Miller, numbers against Justin Verlander are awful. So Verlander has a lot of success against these Texas hitters. And Cole Calhoun, the one player that I was really, really high on last night, his numbers against Verlander, even though he's a lefty, Cole Calhoun and Verlander throwing right-handed, Cole Calhoun has struggled in his career against Justin Verlander. He only hits 161. Now the power output is there, 5 doubles and a homer, but he's averaging less than 1 point per plate appearance against Justin Verlander. So I'm just not anywhere near this Texas lineup, really. If I'm going to generate lineups without Justin Verlander, I might take a look at Marcus Semien, but that's a pretty high price to pay for somebody who's struggled so much. And I mentioned him last night. He had very good numbers against Christian Javier. Willie Calhoun's got good numbers against Justin Verlander. 5 for 11 in his career with a homer, a couple of walks. Now, we mentioned last night Calhoun's season has not went well. He's only hitting 136, a lot like the rest of this Texas lineup. This Texas lineup has been struggling quite a bit, but Willie Calhoun is somebody to look at for $2,000, the literal minimum, if you are wanting some value or some upside against Verlander and you're not going to use Verlander. But I can't recommend it. I'm going to be probably locking in Verlander into the majority of my lineups. What's there to say? I mean, he's 5-1, 1.38 ERA. You're going to be paying the price for him as everyone else will. So you're going to be setting yourself up for, 9v9s essentially. But it is what it is. He's the best pitcher in baseball, arguably. But right now he's pitching like the best pitcher in baseball. So on the other side, John Gray for the Rangers has struggled, as I mentioned earlier. 1-1, 5.73 ERA, but actually has some pretty good numbers against these Astros hitters. You've got one player in particular who has had a lot of success against John Gray. That's Michael Brantley. Brantley in his career, 3 for 4 with a double and 2 walks. So not a lot of sample size here, but what we do have, very promising. And Brantley is not going to break the bank today at 4,300. So I really like Brantley, especially for a Houston side that generally scores a lot of runs. Another player, I mentioned him last night, and every time that I think he's going to do well, he just doesn't come through. Maldonado, 2 for 8 in his career with a double against John Gray. Again, Martin Maldonado hitting a robust 121 this year. It has just not been good for him. He is well known as being a defensive first catcher, but he does have good numbers, or at least okay numbers against John Gray. But John Gray against the rest of these Houston hitters, Kyle Tucker, 0 for 7 against John Gray with 4 strikeouts. Alex Bregman's 0 for 5. Let's see, Yuli Gurriel 0 for 5. Yordan Alvarez only 0 for 2, but both of those are strikeouts. Now, another player that could be interesting if he is in the starting lineup for Houston, and we'll have to check towards the end of the show if lineups are out. But somebody else that could be interesting is Aledmys Diaz. Diaz is 2 for 8, both of them singles, so it's not a lot of point production, but it is something for a lineup that generally has struggled against John Gray. Now, because of the potency of the Houston lineup, I'm probably not going to come to John Gray. That would be quite a pretty good call if you did, because I don't imagine he's going to be widely owned against a Houston lineup that is powerful. But he has good numbers, so there is at least reason to believe in John Gray. I don't think I'll get there. Anything I come to in this game will probably be on Houston's side. I do like Michael Brantley a lot. I'm going to use Justin Verlander, even though he's going to be so widely owned. I will take my chances at finding some good values elsewhere. So that is a look at the game tonight in Minute Maid Park. We move to Kansas City. We move a little bit northward. Go to Kauffman Stadium in a game that I got pretty wrong yesterday. I was really high on Daniel Lynch. He did not pitch well. I was really high on Smeltzer, and he did pitch well. He just had no strikeouts, which really limited the point output that he had. But I was pretty happy with using Smeltzer in the lineups that I did. And then the hitters just weren't there. Although I did highlight Carlos Santana, I was going to nowhere be near him. But if you use Santana based on the numbers against Smeltzer in his career, congratulations, you got 14 points off his solo homer. But the game today, let me bring up the ballpark expected weather. So I mentioned how the wind was blowing in last night from right center. Tonight, it's blowing in from left center. So not a lot of power output that I see in this game. Any that do, apologies, let me bring up my tabs here. Any power output I do see is from Minnesota's side. So let's talk about them first. You have a couple of very interesting options here. Luis Arias against Brad Keller, the starter for the Royals. Arias in his career against Keller is 5 for 8, all of them singles, but 5 for 8. And Arias has played really well coming off the IL recently. Arias is hitting 313. It's a pretty empty 313. His slugging is under 4, but he is on base 41% of the time, hitting generally first or second in this Twins lineup. So you like that. You're going to get the plate appearances. Take a look at Luis Arias. Only first base eligibility today, so that really hinders his value, but he's not going to break the bank at 3,600, especially since there is a position that I really, really like, and basically a team that I'm going to stack in one position. So that is a little bit of foreshadowing on which one. However, a couple other players here for Minnesota. Alex Kirilloff at the bargain basement price of $2,000. He has some good numbers against Brad Keller if he plays 4 for 10, all of them singles. But again, at $2,000, if he gets a couple of hits, it's going to be well worth that price. But his numbers on the season, not good at all, only hitting 172. If he's in the lineup, it's worth an interesting gamble like Willie Calhoun from the last game. But at first base and outfield, there are a lot of better options certainly today. But I wanted to highlight Kirilloff because of the success against Brad Keller. And then, like yesterday, Jorge Polanco having a pretty decent season. A lot of doubles power here. Only hitting 229, so you don't like that. But his numbers against Brad Keller, pretty stellar. 3 for 14. Again, not a high batting average, but all 3 of those hits are extra base hits. He does have a walk. He can steal a couple of bases when he's on base. So Polanco presents some all-around value at second base today. And another position that's kind of scarce in my opinion. I mentioned Marcus Semien earlier. Now Polanco, there's one more player, and I'm not in love with any of them. So it's a pretty light hitting day today, as opposed to yesterday when I thought it was going to be a free-for-all slugfest. So that means it's going to be a free-for-all slugfest today, if you know how anything works around here. But Jorge Polanco is somebody to consider at second base. Certainly the priciest of the options, but the numbers against Brad Keller certainly justify it. And the power output of the season up to now has been okay. 12 extra base hits. He's drawn quite a few walks. So, getting on base 33% of the time is not awful for as low batting average as he has. But the real big play that I like today in the outfield, Max Kepler, big time platoon bat. He generally does play every day, does get sat against some lefties, but against Brad Keller today, I'm expecting a pretty big game. Maybe not a homer, but Max Kepler in his career against Brad Keller, 5 for 14, a double, 2 home runs, and 4 walks. So he is averaging 2.4 points per plate appearance in his career against Brad Keller. Max Kepler, somebody I really, really like. 3,600 is not going to break the bank. Allow you to spend up on some of these higher premier players like a Justin Verlander, like a Byron Buxton if you want to mini stack or even stack this game with Luis Arias. Just for informational purposes, I didn't highlight him. Buxton's 1 for 6 against Brad Keller. He's actually been hit a couple of times, so the points per plate appearance aren't terrible, but 6,000 is a lot, and I don't know if that's the premier position player I'm going to want to use today. Let's see elsewhere here. You've got Gary Sanchez, 1 for 4. Nick Gordon, 1 for 4. So the players that have had any kind of exposure or experience against Brad Keller. I've highlighted here. It's been minimal success from Polanco and from Arias, at least in the power department, but Max Kepler has a lot of power potential against Brad Keller, who's not pitched terrible this season, to be honest with you. 1-3, sub-3 ERA. The issue with Brad Keller is he's just not a strikeout guy. Only 25 strikeouts in 44 innings. You have to bank on him having a lot of innings and quality innings at that, and I just don't see that happening. The whip is solid, so and with the wind blowing in, maybe it's an option. Not one that I am really, really excited about, but might find his way into a lineup or two for me. And then on the other side, Joe Ryan pitching against Kansas City. Now this is a pitcher that I'm pretty high on today. Joe Ryan, 4-2, 2.39 ERA, 36 strikeouts in 38 innings, so a lot better ratio than his counterpart. And a whip that is pretty darn stellar. And not only that, he's only thrown one time against the Royals, and it was very, very effective. The only guy in the lineup that got a hit against Joe Ryan that day is the player I've highlighted, Andrew Benintendi. And generally, he's about the only player that I highlight on Kansas City, especially with Salvador Perez on the IL. Benintendi's about the only one that's had a decent season so far. It's been a very good season, but he's about the only one. He's hitting 302, 361 on base. Now, the power output has not been there, only 3 doubles, couple of triples, couple of homers, but he's the only player that's hitting anywhere near 250 that has a lot of playing time. You've got Hunter Dozier. Okay, Hunter Dozier is having a decent little season here, hitting 280, but again, doesn't get on base a whole lot. The power output has been okay, 7 doubles, 4 homers, but his numbers against Joe Ryan, 0 for 2, 2 strikeouts. Whit Merrifield, 0 for 2 with a strikeout. Nicky Lopez, 0 for 3 with a strikeout. So I really like Joe Ryan today against a Kansas City offense that's been struggling. I think will continue to struggle with the wind blowing in. And it's supposed to be pretty chilly tonight in Kansas City. So that is what I have for you at Kauffman Stadium tonight. We move to the 4th game on the slate, Washington in Milwaukee. And this is a game that I'm going to attack one-sided very, very clearly. You've got Patrick Corbin, who has been absolutely terrible so far this year, and he's been terrible for the last really 2 years. 0-6, ERA above 6, 36 strikeouts in 38 innings, so he is still the strikeout pitcher that he was. He's just not nearly as effective as he used to be, as you can tell by the $4,900 price tag. He's just been getting lit up. 46 hits in those 39 innings to add 19 walks, so whip 1.7. That's tremendously high. It's going to take a lot of strikeouts to make up for that. And the numbers against these Brewers hitters are pretty poor too. You can see that I am really considering a full-on outfield stack for Milwaukee. But first, let's talk about the away lineup, the Nationals against Brandon Woodruff. And a lot of people or your fellow contestants may automatically insert Brandon Woodruff against the Nationals. I would caution you to really think about it, because Brandon Woodruff has had a very, very poor year, especially by the name value of Brandon Woodruff. Yes, he is 4-2, but the ERA very, very high at 5.35. He has just not pitched all that well. A whip above 1.4. He's only averaging 15.5 points per start. That is not going to do it when you're paying $9,500 in price. And the strikeouts, they're still there 43 and 34 innings. So you're really banking on the strikeout upside, which is obviously there for Brandon Woodruff, but he's just not pitched well. And a couple of these Washington players have faced him enough to where they have some decent numbers. So let's talk about them real quick here. You've got Cesar Hernandez, the leadoff hitter for Washington. He has faced Woodruff 10 times. He's 3 for 10 with a double. Does have 3 strikeouts, so that's obviously part of the strikeout upside there with Woodruff. But Hernandez does have some experience against Brandon Woodruff and some decent experience at that. Cesar Hernandez at 4,000. Him and Simeon and Jorge Polanco are really some of the only second base options that have a lot of experience against their starters, and they're all around 4,000. Not a lot to love in the second base market today. If you want to believe in a Jose Altuve, I won't blame you, but after last night's performance, I'm a little gun shy. And John Gray's been pretty effective against the Astros, so a little gun shy there. And then Colton Wong, pretty atrocious numbers against Corbin. So Hernandez presents some minor intrigue here. And then elsewhere on the diamond for the Nationals, you've got D. Strange Gordon at 2,000. He's got a little bit of exposure and some success against Brandon Woodruff. 2 for 4, both singles, but generally is in a little bit of a platoon against right-handed pitchers. D. Strange Gordon hitting left-handed, and then Alcides Escobar hitting right-handed. It would not surprise me to see D. Strange Gordon in the lineup today, whether that's at short or in the outfield. And then lastly, obviously Juan Soto can always run into one. He is 1 for 3 with a walk against Woodruff. Certainly not a bad option if you have the money and you don't want to be on Brandon Woodruff. One player that I did not highlight, he does not have any experience against Brandon Woodruff, but is having a pretty good season. I mentioned him last night. He was not in the lineup with the lefty Eric Lauer throwing. Is Yadiel Hernandez. Hernandez is hitting 327, slugging nearly 500. So he is averaging just under 2 points per plate appearance. With the righty throwing Woodruff on the mound, I would expect Yadiel Hernandez to get the start. Is a very intriguing option that I did not highlight. And his price today is, let me bring it up here. Let's see. Yadiel Hernandez is at 3,700. So another mid-price option like Max Kepler that I could see having some value today against Brandon Woodruff. But let's go to the side that I'm really, really excited about. That's Milwaukee against the struggling Patrick Corbin. A full outfield list here for Milwaukee. Let's cover the guys that I don't like first. I mentioned Colton Wong. He is 1 for 9 in his career against Patrick Corbin. You've got Rowdy Tellez 0 for 2, Jace Peterson 0 for 4. So the one player that I did not highlight that could be an interesting play today is Luis Urias. He is 1 for 4 against Patrick Corbin, so not a lot of plate appearances, mediocre success. But with the lack of options at third base today, Luis Urias could be a potential option there today at 4,100, I believe is his price. But let's talk about this loaded outfield against Patrick Corbin. And first off is Christian Yelich. Yelich has had good numbers against Patrick Corbin, even though he is Yelich being the left-handed hitter against the lefty throwing Corbin. Yelich in his career hits 250, 2 triples, and a homer. He is averaging 2.3 points per plate appearance against Patrick Corbin, and especially with Corbin having struggled lately, I do not see the strikeouts being near a problem for Yelich today. And Yelich's season has been turning around quite slowly, but starting to come around. 9 doubles, 5 homers. He is hitting 245, slugging a little over 430, so not Christian Yelich-like, but has been hot as of the past maybe couple weeks or so. So a lot to like here. The one player I'm most excited about, and I would advocate that you use as much as possible, is Hunter Renfroe. Renfroe, 267 on the year, slugging at 520. He's averaging 1.9 points per plate appearance, 9 homers, leads this Brewers team, a right-handed power bat against Patrick Corbin, and his numbers against Corbin are quite good. 5 for 16, a double and 2 homers. He's averaging 2.6 points per plate appearance against Corbin in his career. So Hunter Renfroe is probably one of my locks for today. Really like that matchup and trying to attack Corbin. And then a couple others here. Andrew McCutchen has had good numbers against Patrick Corbin from his little time in San Francisco. So McCutchen in his career against Patrick Corbin, 10 for 41, so only a 244 average, but does have 2 doubles and 2 homers to go along with 7 walks. So he's averaging 1.6 points per plate appearance against Patrick Corbin. I don't mind that at all if I am looking to go another mid-price option, say with a Max Kepler or a Yadiel Hernandez, something along those lines. I don't mind McCutchen at his price today. And then finally, even though he doesn't play a whole lot, Lorenzo Cain, 4 for 10 in lifetime against Patrick Corbin, all of them being singles. And Cain has had a pretty poor start to his season. That is an understatement. Only hitting 182, a very empty 182. He's only got 3 doubles. He hadn't even been getting on base all that much. So not a lot to like there. But if he is in the lineup, he does have some success against Patrick Corbin if you're looking for a budget option. But I am going to be trying to load up on these Brewers outfielders as much as possible. Yelich, Renfroe is going to be pretty much a lock for me. So I'm hoping to repeat the success of Lockdom when Trevor Story hit a homer. I like the ability or the potential for Renfroe, the probability even of Renfroe hitting a homer today. So that is Game 4. Let's move to Game 5, the second of a twin bill today, which is the Mets and Colorado. So that game right now is going on, and I wrote down the lineups because in a doubleheader day, teams will mix and match and try not to wear their guys out. So for the Mets, a couple of the players that have been playing today, Nimmo, Marte, Lindor, Alonso, McNeil, Escobar, Dom Smith, and Pete Mazeika are in the game for the first game. So I would imagine Starling Marte might get the night off. Perhaps McNeil or Escobar. I know Thomas Nido will catch. So it's really hard to project what the lineup's going to be since that game's still going on. All I can really guarantee is that Thomas Nido will catch, and I'm not excited to use Thomas Nido. Only hitting 207 this year and slugging only 241, so it's a very empty 207. And his numbers against Austin Gomber are not good. 0 for 3. And really, Austin Gomber has some pretty good numbers against this Mets lineup. So I really only highlighted one player. It's not even a guarantee that he's going to play. It's just the right-handed power bat, Pete Alonso, at Coors Field. So if he's in the lineup for the second game, Pete Alonso hitting 276, 10 homers, averaging 2.1 points per plate appearance this season. It's an interesting option, but not one that I'm excited to use. I will if I have the money or whatnot, but Austin Gomber is a pretty interesting option here, considering his numbers against these Mets hitters. And Gomber's pitched well, 4.38 ERA, 32 strikeouts in 39 innings, so the potential for a decent amount of strikeouts is there. 39 innings in 7 games, Not the highest ratio you would like to see, but almost 6 innings per start. And he's pitched fairly well at Coors Field in his career. So Gomber presents some intrigue at his price. Lower portion of the starting pitching market if you don't want to go Verlander and, say, a Woodruff, or a Verlander and a Joe Ryan or whatnot. Gomber could present some value there. And then on the other side, Trevor Williams making his, I believe, first start of this season. He has been pitching in relief the majority of the time for the Mets this season. 6 games, only 15 innings. He's 0-2. You see the ERA there, not terrible, but he's only been averaging 6 points per outing. So the Colorado hitters have some pretty good numbers against Trevor Williams. Let's start first with Jose Iglesias. Iglesias in his career 2 for 8 with a triple. Not very often you get Jose Iglesias with some extra base hit potential, but hitting here in Cleveland in Colorado provides that anyway. And he's had 8 doubles this season. He's hitting .302, 1.5 points per plate appearance. It's not terrible, but it's certainly not an outstanding option. But just like second base, I don't see a lot at shortstop today either. So listed Iglesias here at 4,100. And then 3 outfield options. Again, like the Brewers, can see using a stack of Rockies if they play, because the Rockies lineup in the day game was Connor Joe, Charlie Blackmon. Chris Bryant has been activated off the IL. He is back for Colorado. CJ Cron, McMahon, Rogers, Jonathan Daza, Iglesias, and Diaz. So I can pretty much guarantee you that Dom Nunez will be catching tonight's game for Colorado. But Nunez's numbers against Trevor Williams not great, so I don't recommend going there. But to talk about these 3 outfielders, Charlie Blackmon in his career against Trevor Williams, 3 for 8 with a double, averaging almost 1.5 points per plate appearance. Then you got Randall Grichuk, 2 for 5. But the big numbers here from his time in Chicago is Chris Bryant, if he plays. And there's no guarantee he'll play fresh off the IL. Not sure if the Rockies will want to play him both games of a doubleheader coming back. But if he does, Bryant is 6 for 17 in his career against Trevor Williams, a triple and 2 homers, along with 7 walks. So against Trevor Williams in his career, Chris Bryant has averaged 2.6 points per plate appearance. So a lot to like there. If Bryant's in the lineup, you'll have to pay very close attention. Probably take it up to the deadline to see if Bryant is in the lineup. But quite a bit on the Rocky side that I'm pretty interested in tonight. Austin Gomber from the starting pitching side, and then Blackmon or Grichuk, maybe even both, and Jose Iglesias at shortstop, with shortstop being pretty bare. A lot of options here in Colorado that I like. And then finally, the last game on the docket tonight is the Oakland A's in Angel Stadium to take on the LA Angels. And this is a game that I got semi-right, I guess. I did use some Chase Silseth. Didn't go quite so well for me. Generally speaking, once a team has faced a starter, they get kind of a look at him and they make their adjustments. Silseth did not have a great outing yesterday, and the A's exploded. I mean, exploded for 4 runs. That is quite an offensive output for this offense that has been pretty darn bad, just to be fair. But the pitching matchup, Frankie Montas, probably the second best pitcher behind Paul Blackburn, who's now 5-0 for the A's. But Montas, 9,800 for the strikeouts. In 49 innings, he has 53 strikeouts, 49 innings in also 8 games. So you're getting more than 6 innings per outing. And Montas has averaged 19 points per start, actually a little over that. A lot of that being in the strikeout upside. So a lot to like there with Frankie Montas. and the Angels hitters have never faced him. So kind of a couple of different options to go here for the Angels. I listed the left-handed power bat of Jared Walsh, and then the two obvious names, Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani. The wind is supposed to be blowing out to left this evening as it was last night, so that is the reason for the players that I've highlighted. But Frankie Montas is interesting. The price I'm not in love with, but I do like all the strikeouts that he generally accrues. So if you're wanting to go two top-end pitching options today, I would look at Verlander and Montas, although I imagine they'll both be pretty widely owned. And then for the A's offense against Michael Lorenzen, not a lot of success there either. In fact, last Saturday, Lorenzen pitched against the A's in Oakland Coliseum. It went very well for Lorenzen. He threw 7 innings, gave up 5 hits, only 1 run, but the downside or the cap on Michael Lorenzen's upside is there's not a lot of strikeouts here. Lorenzen in this season, he has 24 strikeouts in 35 innings, so not a lot of strikeouts. He's a pitch-to-contact guy, keeps the ball on the ground. The A's hit 4 double plays last week against him, so not a lot of danger there in the power department, but I've highlighted the guys who did have success last week against Lorenzen. It was Tony Kemp. Kemp went 1 for 3 with a double and a walk, and then Luis Barrera went 2 for 2. Barrera has been one of the few bright spots for this terrible Oakland offense. Barrera has only had 31 plate appearances, but is hitting .370, averaging 2 points per plate appearance. If he is in the starting lineup, take a look at Barrera, especially at the price of $2,100. So there is a look at these 6 games in the docket tonight. I'm going to go back and see if there are any lineups out for the evening. Let's see. We have 4 lineups out at least, so 2 full games. So let's move to the first game that has a full lineup out. It is Texas at Houston. Mentioned Marcus Semien and Willie Calhoun. Marcus Semien hitting in his usual second spot in the order, behind Brad Miller, ahead of Corey Seager and Adolis Garcia. If you are wanting to take a chance at the high power upside but very low success that Calhoun has had against Verlander, Calhoun is hitting 5th. And then on the Astros side, it is a good thing that I didn't recommend Jose Altuve. He is getting the day off today. So Jose Siri leads off for the Astros. Michael Brantley hitting 2nd. And Martin Maldonado is not in the lineup either. Jason Castro is catching and hitting left-handed against the right-handed throwing John Gray. So really the only... and Aledmus Diaz is in the lineup. I would imagine probably playing second base for Houston today. Diaz is hitting 7th, but is at $4,400. Very hefty price for Diaz, but one that is certainly an option since he has shortstop and third base eligibility, 2 positions that I don't feel like there are a lot of options today. So Diaz is worth a consideration in that regard. So that is the Texas and Houston game. We also have Minnesota and Kansas City's full lineups out. So we moved there. And for Minnesota, Luis Arias is hitting 2nd. So you like that a lot. Polanco 4th, Max Kepler 5th. So a lot to like there in that lineup against Brad Keller. Alex Kirilloff is not in the lineup. So Arias 2nd, Polanco 4th, and Max Kepler 5th. I really like Kepler today if I'm not going to stack Brewers or Rockies outfielders. And then on the other side for Kansas City, the only player I highlighted Andrew Benintendi hitting second, but 4,600 is a lot to pay for a pitcher who's had a lot of success against this team in general. If you are interested, Hunter Dozier hitting cleanup, Bobby Witt Jr. hitting third. Again, just not a lot of interest here in this Kansas City offense that is not as bad as Oakland's, but is not a whole lot better than Oakland's either. If I go back to that game, it is Bobby Witt Jr. only hitting 221. He has had 1.5 points per plate appearance, a lot of that being buffered by the 6 stolen bases that he has. I just don't have a lot of interest in this Kansas City lineup right now. But if you do want to try to attack Joe Ryan, I would recommend Benintendi. Let's see, any partial lineups that we have out here. The Tampa Bay lineup is out, so we'll move to Baltimore very quickly. Baltimore's lineup is not out, but Tampa Bay's is. You have Francisco Mejia hitting 8th, so at least an option there. And then Yandy Diaz hitting 2nd. So I really like Diaz with the lack of third base options today. So that is that for the first game. Washington and Milwaukee. Milwaukee's lineup is out, so we'll move to American Family Field. And for Milwaukee, you have Andrew McCutchen leading off. You really like that at 3,800 with the plate appearances that are expected. I expect Milwaukee to put up quite a few runs. So him leading off, Luis Urias hitting 2nd, Yelich 3rd, Hunter Renfroe 4th. And if you want to go with the bargain basement of Lorenzo Cain, he is playing. He's hitting 8th. But Yelich 3rd, Renfroe 4th, McCutchen leading off, even Luis Urias at hitting 2nd with third base eligibility and shortstop eligibility. So a lot to like there. Going to be stacking those Brewers hitters today. Let's see. New York and Colorado are playing right now, and then obviously Oakland and the Angels are much later tonight. So that is a look at the 6-game slate today. Let's come back to here. Thanks for tuning in. I really do appreciate the support and the time that you take to watch. In the comments, let me know if you use or who you use today. Did you use the top-end pitching market? Brandon Woodruff, Justin Verlander, Frankie Montas. Who were some of your locks in the lineup? I am going to lock Hunter Renfroe. Not sure what else I'm going to lock, to be honest. Probably Verlander, but specifically as far as hitters, Hunter Renfroe is probably about the only lock I'm going to have. So jump in the comments. Let me know how you do, the players that you used, how you're doing, and whatnot. So that will be it for the May 21st MLB DraftKings lineup card. And for all of the contests that you enter for them, may all your bets be profitable.